यस्य भक्तां संयुञ्जतोऽपि वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दं चतुर्विधा श्रीभगवत्प्रसाद स्वादन्नतृप्तान् हरिभक्तसङ्घान् कृत्वा तृप्तिं भजता सदैव वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दं श्रीराधिका माधवयोरपार माधुर्यलीला गुणरूपनाम्ना प्रतीक्षणा स्वादनलोलुपस्य वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दं निकुञ्जयूनो रतिकेलिसीधे यायालिभिर्योक्तिरपेक्षहीन्या तत्रातिदक्षादतिवल्लभस्य वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् साक्षाद्धरित्वेन समस्तवास्त्रे युक्तस्य थावा भवेव शाब्दि किन्तु प्रभुर्या प्रिय एवं तस्य वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दं यस्य प्रसादात् भगवत् प्रसादो यस्य प्रसादान्नगति कुतोऽपि आयं स्तुवां तस्य यस्य श्रीसन्ध्या वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दं नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष्य शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृन्द नमस्ते नरसिंहाय प्रह्लादाय हिरण्यकाशीपूर्वक्षः शीलटङ्कानखालय इतो नरसिंहा परतो नरसिंहा यतो यतो यामि ततो नरसिंहा वहे नरसिंहा हृदये नरसिंहा नरसिंहमदिं शरणं प्रपदे तव करकमलवरे नाथा अद्भुत शृङ्गार ललिता हिरण्यकशिपु तनुभृङ्गा केशवधृता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे वृंदाय तुलसीदेव्याय प्रियाय केशवस्य च विष्णुभक्ति प्रददेवी सत्कृते नमो नमः वृंदाय तुलसीदेव्याय प्रियाय केशवस्य च विष्णुभक्ति प्रददेवी सत्कृते नमो नमः वृंदाय तुलसीदेव्याय प्रियाय केशवस्य च विष्णुभक्ति प्रददेवी सत्कृते नमो नमः नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः श्री राधा कृष्ण सेवा पाबो यही अभिलाषी जे तुम्हार शरण लो तारा वंश पूर्ण हो कृपा કરી કરો તારે વૃંદાવન વાસી રહે વિલાસ કુંજ દિયો વાસ નયને હરિબો સદા યુગલ રૂપ રાશિ એ નિવેદન ધર સખેર અનુગત કર સેવાધિકાર દિયે કરો નિજ દાસી कीन कृष्ण दासी को यही है नमो रहो श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेम सदा न भासी यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्मा हत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणसन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्मत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणसन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्मत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणसन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे वृन्दाय तुलसीदेव्याय प्रियाय केशवस्य च विष्णुभक्ति प्रदेवी सत्यव्रते नमो नमः वृन्दाय तुलसीदेव्याय प्रियाय केशवस्य च विष्णुभक्ति प्रदेवी सत्यव्रते नमो नमः वृंदावन तुलसीदेव्याय प्रियाय केशवस्य च विष्णु भक्ति प्रदेवी वृंदादेवी भक्ति प्रदानी देवी तुलसी महारानी की।
Yes, ma'am. First chapter, Mass. Yes, ma'am. Contents. Introduction. First chapter. The Lord of the Universe. Second. Yes, ma'am.
Read from introduction.
Yes, ma'am. Introduction. In the course of history, the world has known many cultures and civilizations, but few remain alive and flourishing for more than a few hundred years at a time. Consider the Vikings, Mayans, Aztecs, Incas, Greeks, Romans, the pharaohs of Egypt, or even the land of Atlantis, mentioned by Plato. Considering these cultures, one is compelled to question how the worship of Lord Jagannath has continued to blossom despite centuries of wearing time and violent oppression from foreign invaders. I began seriously researching this ancient religious culture sometime during the later part of 1988. One sunny winter day, I stood atop the Raghunandan Library photographing the massive temple of Lord Jagannath, when I heard a sarcastic voice declare, "You are a fool." "Excuse me?" I asked, surprised by an Indian man who was also viewing the temple from the same rooftop. "You worship a god who won't even let you into his temple?" the man asserted in a British accent. In one sense, he was right. Because of the cultural heritage in Puri, entrance into the temple is restricted only to those born in Hindu families. "You see, chap," he continued more politely, "I have just arrived from England. I am not even Hindu. I am a Christian. But because my ancestors were Indian, they let me into the temple thinking I am also a Hindu. What do you think? Is that wise? Here you are worshipping this god and you can't even go. But because I look like a Hindu, they let me in, even though I don't follow the Hindu religion." This gentleman wasn't just idly conversing with a foreigner, the way many people in India do. I sensed a hint of interest on his part, and his thick British accent added an air of aristocracy. I replied,
Yes, please.
And no doubt, the temple management is a bit out of touch with today's world. But I have seen Lord Jagannath in many places: Paris, London, Florence, Chicago, Los Angeles, Honolulu, Atlanta. I don't agree that it's foolish to worship Lord Jagannath. These fools are those who are ignorant about God and His unlimited potencies. Our conversation took place at the beginning of my research, when it wasn't really clear to me exactly why foreigners weren't allowed inside. It seemed odd that men that meat-eating drunkards were allowed into the temple if born in Hindu families or with brown-skinned bodies that only looked Hindus, whereas the following more closely the Hindu religious codes were considered outcasts simply because of their birth. Having to deal with Hindu orthodoxy in Puri.
इसमें बिठा दीजिए जगन्नाथ जी रथ पे। हाँ?
कब जाएंगे कब लेना?
आज रथ यात्रा है, महाराज चाहते हैं इसमें बिठा। लोग दर्शन करेंगे।
Yes, ma'am. Having to deal with Hindu orthodoxy in Puri and not being allowed into the temple, however, were only my first obstacles. One can hardly imagine the legends, theories, fantasies, folklore. Yes, Maharaj. Chapter 1, The Lord of the Universe. Jagannath Puri. Jagannath Puri, one of the most popular pilgrimage sites in India, is located on the country's northeastern shores, about 300 miles south of Kolkata. Puri's main attraction is a hand-carved 25th century stone temple located on Badand Grand Road, 12th century. This massive shrine, which serves as a spiritual vortex for the entire town's activities, is dedicated to Lord Jagannath, the Lord of the Universe. Puri is not only a sacred tirtha or holy place, but also a pleasant seaside resort. Today, this historic town's population comprises some 1,800,000 residents, with abundant hotels, guest houses, and dharmashalas throughout the district. Thousands of pilgrims and tourists can be seen on the beaches year-round due to the agreeable semi-tropical climate. The town is in the state of Orissa, a veritable museum of ancient stone sculptured temples, 300 coastal miles of pristine beaches, the largest blackish lake in Asia, bird sanctuaries, and tribal folks living in remote villages of the hilly regions. To learn how the thriving worship of Lord Jagannath began, we must look into the Vedas, ancient Sanskrit texts. There are no historical records prior to these writings. The Vedas are unique, especially when compared to our modern world of scientific theory and speculation, because they are not compilations of human knowledge. Vedic information is derived from another dimension, the spiritual world. Within this universe, one can find only material knowledge, but beyond this universe, one can find transcendental knowledge. The Vedas give information of people and places beyond this material universe. Those who believe in experimental knowledge may doubt Vedic conclusions, but they cannot even calculate how far this universe expands, or nor can they reach far into the universe itself. If we can't even travel to the end of the universe, how can we possibly go beyond it? There is another nature beyond this material world, but how can we find out about the places where the planets and inhabitants? Yes, Maharaj. Last time. There is a section, Chaitanya's Puri pastime, and then here is Prabhupada's pastimes with Jagannath. Last section. We finished Chaitanya's pastime. These all are details. Yes, Chapter 3. Jagannath worship prior to the 15th century. A brief look at the history of India. To establish a well-rounded understanding of Jagannath worship, it is necessary to look beyond the small town of Puri for historical information. Beyond the town is located on the seashore, excavation is difficult, and the saline climate withers away remains more rapidly than at inland sites. A short sketch of India's history in general, therefore, will shed more light on how the worship has been influenced during the last. Chapter 4, Lord Chaitanya's Puri pastimes. Renaissance. During the famous Renaissance years of the late 15th century, Europeans began vigorously exploring for sea routes to India. Camel caravans had been trading overland via the legendary Silk Road for generations, but establishing sea routes would obviously create more rapid avenues for commerce. King Ferdinand and Queen Elizabeth of Spain sent Christopher Columbus to seek the kingdom of Great Khan, the islands of Japan, and the riches of India, spices, ivory, jewels, and fine fabrics. Although Columbus sailed out to sea, the Portuguese explorer Vasco da Gama sailed into Malabar coastal port of Calicut on May 27, 1498, to establish the first solid trade route from Europe. As the Europeans were evolving out of the Dark Ages and progressing in art, music, dance, and drama, a spiritual renaissance was taking place in India. This was due to the appearance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead on earth. Whenever the Supreme Lord appears, there is a natural raising of consciousness. The Bhagavad Gita says, Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam dharma samsthapanabhaya sambhavami yuge yuge. To deliver the pious and to annihilate the miscreants, as well as to re-establish the principles of religion, I myself appear millennium after millennium. All the world's great religions teach that God desired to guide His fallen children by establishing religious principles. But most religions focus more on the appearance of God's representative in this world than on God Himself appearing here. God is merciful, and because He wishes to extend His mercy to us, He either comes Himself or sends His representative to teach us how to become free from material entanglement and go back to our eternal home in the spiritual world. According to time and circumstance, the Lord or His representative may instruct particular cultures and civilizations to perform a variety of rituals, but the essence of all religions is the same: to evoke our devotional sentiments for the Lord as His eternal servants. When the Lord descends as an avatar, He sometimes behaves like an ordinary human being, and at other times reveals His divine attributes. He doesn't force people to serve Him by a constant display of godly power. Rather, He finds more pleasure in sharing natural affection feelings with His devotees than in their awe, reverence, or even fearful servitude. This is especially true of the avatar known as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In this particular incarnation, the Lord appeared in the mood of a devotee, Bhakt Bhav, to taste the sublime emotions of ecstasy that only a devotee can feel while serving Him. He also taught by His personal example how to render service unto the Supreme Lord. In Chaitanya Charitamrita, a biography of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the author, 𝐾𝐲𝐿 Goswami, makes the following suggestion. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Daya Karah Vichar, Vichara Karile Chitte Pabe Chamatkar. If you are indeed interested in logic and arguments, kindly apply it to the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. If you do so, you will find it to be strikingly wonderful. Advent of the Lord. 400 miles north of Puri, in the village of Navadvip, West Bengal, on the full moon night of Falgun, Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared in the home of Jagannath Mishra and his wife Shachi. As a child, the boy was nicknamed Nimai because he was born near a neem tree. His parents named him Vishwambar, and the local ladies called him Gaur Hari because of his golden complexion. The Lord's childhood pastimes are beautifully described in Vrindavan Das Thakur's Chaitanya Bhagavat and are summarized in �Ｋṛṣṇa Goswami's Chaitanya Charitamrita. Both works were written in Bengali during the late 16th century. There are also several other biographies extant, including Murari Gupta's Sri Krishna Chaitanya Charitamrita, Kavi Karnapura's Sri Krishna Chaitanya Charitamrita Mahakavya, Lochan Das Thakur's Chaitanya Mangal, Jayanand's book of the same name, Narahari Chakravarti's Bhakti Ratnakar, and several other lesser works composed by later disciples and grand disciples. From these accounts, we get a clear understanding of the Lord's life and valuable information about the culture of India during that period. It should also be noted that historians trace Vishwambar Mishra's family heritage back to Orissa, to a family that migrated to Sylhet at the time Kapilendra captured the throne from Bhanudev. When Nimai reached the age of 7, Jagannath Mishra dutifully performed the sacred thread ceremony for his son, and Nimai attained poise born status. A year later, his father admitted him to the school of Gangadas Pandit in Ganganagar. His classmates were Sri Gadadhar, Purushottama, Jagadananda, Mukunda, and others, and by the time he was 10, Nimai had become learned in grammar, rhetoric, smriti, and nyaya. When Nimai was 12, his elder brother Vishwarup learned that his parents were planning his marriage. Vishwarup therefore left home suddenly and accepted the ashram of a sannyasi renunciant. Though only a young boy at the time, Nimai consoled his parents with sweet words and logic. Shortly thereafter, when Nimai was only 13, his father left this mortal world. Mother Shachi was exceedingly aggrieved, and Lord Chaitanya, with his usual contented demeanor, consoled his widowed mother. At the age of 14 or 15, Mahaprabhu was married to Lakshmi Priya, the daughter of Vallabhacharya, also of Nadia, the district in which Navadvip was located. By the time Nimai Pandit was considered one of the most learned scholars of Nadia, a renowned seat of Nyaya philosophy and Sanskrit learning. He then went to eastern Bengal along the banks of Padma river to acquire wealth through his learning. In those days, it was customary for scholars who were regarded as high-class people to earn their livelihood from scholarly endeavors such as holding debates, teaching, or establishing their own school. While Nimai Pandit was residing in East Bengal, however, Lakshmi Priya was bitten by a snake and died suddenly. Upon returning home, Nimai once again found his mother in mourning. Later, at his mother's request, he married a second time, this time to Vishnu Priya, the daughter of Raj Pandit Sanatan Mishra. At 17, Nimai travelled to Gaya to perform his father's Pindadan and Shraddha ceremonies. While visiting the holy city, Vishwambar accepted initiation from Ishwar Puri, a disciple of the saint Madhavendra Puri. Ishwar Puri instructed Nimai to always chant the holy names of the Lord, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Upon his return to Navadvip, Nimai began nocturnal kirtans in the home of Srivas Pandit. Following the instructions of his spiritual master, he and his associates continuously danced and chanted the holy name in ecstasy. For an entire year, the Lord and his friends held these kirtans. During this time, Nimai's spiritual emotions began to overflow almost uncontrollably. When one is in a direct relationship with the Lord in intense love, various ecstatic symptoms manifest, sometimes internally and sometimes externally. 8 of the symptoms are prominent: becoming stunned, shedding tears, perspiration, changing of bodily color, standing of the hairs on the body, trembling, failing of the voice, and finally complete devastation or trance. These symptoms occur when the vital force of life comes into contact with different elements within the body.
These symptoms occurs when the vital force of the life comes into the contact with different elements within the body. When the vital force comes into contact with the earth element, one is stunned. When the same force comes into contact with water, there is a shedding of tears. When the same force comes into contact with fire, there is a perspiration or changing of the bodily color such as paleness. When the force comes into contact with air, there is a standing of hairs on the body, trembling and failing of the voices. And when the force comes into contact with sky, there is a complete devastation or a loss of consciousness and trance. Nimai Pandit began always feeling such symptomatic expressions within himself. But being afraid of outsiders, he didn't generally manifest them externally. Mahaprabhu was natural, soft-hearted, though strong in his principle. He declared that party spirit and sectarians were the two greatest enemies of progress. And as long as he continued to be an inhabitant of Nadia belonging to a certain family, his mission would not meet with complete success. Therefore, on February 3rd, 1510, Vishwambar officially left home and accepted the renounced order of life from Keshav Bharati in the nearby village of Katwa, receiving the initiated name Sri Krishna Chaitanya. He was only 24 years old at that time, and his mother and young wife were heartbroken. According to Vedic custom, when a man takes sannyas, he can no longer live at home. It would impede his spiritual progress. Everyone in Nadia became disappointed, knowing that now the Lord would leave Nadia forever. Mother Sachi request. At final gathering of friends in the home of Advaita Acharya, Mother Sachi was so distraught she could hardly stand without help. Anticipating her son's imminent departure, she appealed to all the devotees. As long as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu remained at the house of Advaita Acharya, only she would cook and supply his food. It would be her last opportunity. Hearing her appeal, all the devotees agreed. Seeing his mother's eagerness, Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu became a little unsettled. He assembled the devotees and spoke to them. Without your order, I tried to go to Vrindavan and the Lord of the fruits. Without your order, I tried to go to Vrindavan and the Lord of the Lord, Krishna's childhood pastime. Just after accepting sannyas, there was some obstacle, however, and I had to return home. My dear friend, although I have suddenly accepted the renounced order, I know that I shall never be indifferent to you. As long as I am in this world, I shall never give up you, nor I can give up my mother. After accepting sannyas, it is not the duty of a sannyasi to remain at his birthplace, encircled by relatives. Make some arrangement so I may not leave you. At the same time, people may not blame me for remaining with relatives after taking sannyas. Hearing Lord Chaitanya's request, all the devotees, headed by Advaita Acharya, approached Mother Sachi. When they submitted Lord Chaitanya's statement, Mother Sachi said, "It will be a great happiness for me if Nimai stay here. However, if someone blames him, it will be my unhappiness. If Nimai remains at Jagannath Puri, he may not leave any one of us, and still he can remain aloof as a sannyasi. Thus, the both purpose will be fulfilled. Jagannath Puri and Navdeep are intimately related like two rooms in the same house. People from Navdeep frequently go to Jagannath Puri, and those in Jagannath Puri comes to Navdeep. This going and coming will be help carry news of Nimai. Lord Chaitanya, in this way I will be able to get news of him. All devotees will be able to travel back and forth, and sometimes he may also come to bathe in the Gangas. I do not care for my personal happiness or unhappiness, but only for his happiness. Indeed, I accept his happiness as my happiness." Hearing Sachi Mata, the devotee assured her that her order, like a Vedic injunction, could not be violated, and they informed Lord Chaitanya of her decision. Hearing it, the Lord was pleased and few days later left for Puri. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu travels to Jagannath Puri. 500 years ago, of course, there was no trains, automobiles or modern form of transport. People usually walk from place to place. Lord Chaitanya followed the Nityanand, Mukund, Jagadanand and Damodar traveled from Navadip in Bengal to Jagannath Puri in Kalinga, approximately 600 km. Along the way, they stopped in Ramuna to see the deities of 𝐾𝐲𝐿 Gopinath. Then continued to Katak. When they saw the Sakshi Gopal deity, the Chaitanya Bhagavat recount many of the places visited by the Lord Chaitanya on the way Bhubaneswar, where the devotee took the darshans of Lingaraj and bathed in Bindu Sarovar. When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu eventually arrived at Kamlapur, he took his bath in the Bharikinda river and left his sannyas staff with Nityanand Prabhu. As Chaitanya Mahaprabhu later entered the nearby temple of the Lord Shiva, Kapoteswara, Nityanand Prabhu broke the Lord's staff into three and threw it in the river. Nityanand Prabhu, knowing Lord Chaitanya to be on the topmost platform of the devotional service, broke the sannyasi danda because according to Vedic practice, only lower grade sannyasi required such a staff. After visiting Kapoteswara, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu saw the pinnacle of Jagannath temple from a distance. Offering obeisances to the temple, he began dancing in ecstasy of love of God. All the devotees similarly become ecstatic in the Lord's association, and they danced and chanted as they walked along with the main road. The Lord eventually arrived at the place known as Alarnath, a 13th century bridge, 18 arches. Arches means 18. The bridge over the Medhupur stream is at the entrance to the Jagannath Puri from the Bhubaneswar route. Arriving at the bridge, the Lord suddenly realized he is no longer had his danda. He then asked Nityanand Prabhu, "Please return my staff." "Your staff was broken," Nityanand replied. "When you fell down in ecstasy, I caught you, but both of us together fell upon the staff, and it broke under our weight. Where the pieces have gone, I cannot say. It is certainly because of my offense that your staff has broken. Now you punish me as you think proper." Hearing this story, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu expressed some anger and sadness. "You have all helped me by bringing me to Nilachal," he said thoughtfully. "However, my only possession was that one staff, and you have not kept it. Therefore, all of you should go before or behind me to see Lord Jagannath. I shall not go with you. My Lord,
My Lord Mukundat answered, "You should go ahead and allow us to follow. We shall not go with you." Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu then walked swiftly before the other devotees. No one could understand the real purpose of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityanand Prabhu. The devotees couldn't understand why Nityanand Prabhu broke the staff, why Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu permitted him to do so, or why after permitting him, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu became angry. Sri Chaitanya meets Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. In ecstasy, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went from Atharanala directly to Lord Jagannath's temple. He entered the majestic temple and saw the deities from a distance. Then he spontaneously ran to embrace Lord Jagannath. Suddenly, however, Sri Chaitanya was overcome with intense love of God and fainted on the floor. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu fell down, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya happened to see him. Some ignorant interior guards, thinking that the Lord was misbehaving, rushed forward to beat him with sticks. But Sarvabhauma, who was highly respected by the temple authorities, forbade them to do so. The Bhattacharya was surprised to see both the Lord's personal beauty and the transcendental transformation wrought in his body. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu remained unconscious for a long time, lying on the floor of the temple, while the Bhattacharya tried to think of a way to wake him. Meanwhile, the time came for offerings to Lord Jagannath. Therefore, while the Lord was still unconscious, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, with the help of the watchmen and some disciples, carried the Lord to his home. A large crowd gathered, and everyone in the crowd was eager to carry the Lord. So he was passed from hand to hand as if he was being transported by a swarm of ants. So many people followed the Lord that when they arrived at Sarvabhauma's house, the doors had to be closed to keep the huge crowd outside. Examining the Lord, Sarvabhauma was alarmed to see that he didn't appear to be breathing. He took a fine cotton swab and placed it before the Lord's nostrils. When the cotton moved slightly, he became hopeful. Sitting beside Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he thought, this is a transcendental ecstatic transformation brought about by love of Krishna. Sarabham knew that such signs take place only in bodies of eternally liberated devotees. While the Bhattacharya was thinking in this way, the 4 devotees travelling with the Lord arrived at Simhadwar gate. There, the devotees heard people talking about a mendicant who had fallen unconscious upon seeing the deity. Quote, a sannyasi fell unconscious upon seeing the deity of Lord Jagannath, someone said. Because his consciousness didn't return, Sarabham Bhattacharya took him to his home. Hearing this, the devotees discovered where Lord Chaitanya could be found. Just then, Gopinath Acharya arrived. Gopinath Acharya, a former resident of Nadia, was the brother-in-law of Sarabham and a devotee of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He knew the Lord's true identity. Gopinath Acharya also knew Mukunda Datta, and when he saw his old friend at Jagannath Puri, he was surprised. Seeing him, Mukunda Datta offered his obeisances. Then Gopinath Acharya inquired about Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The Lord has arrived here already, Mukunda Datta answered, and we have come with him. After accepting the sannyas order, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has come to Jagannath Puri and brought all of us with him. He left our company at Atharnala and walked ahead to see Lord Jagannath. We just arrived and are looking for him. From the talk of the people in general, we have guessed that the Lord is now at the house of Sarabham Bhattacharya. Just as I was thinking of meeting you, by chance we have actually met. First, let us all go to the house of Sarabham Bhattacharya and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Later we shall come to see Lord Jagannath. Hearing this and feeling pleased, Gopinath Acharya took all the devotees to Sarabham Bhattacharya's house, and they were admitted. Upon seeing Nityanand Prabhu, the Bhattacharya offered him obeisances. Then the devotees saw the Lord lying unconscious. Gopinath Acharya, who was particularly eager to meet the Lord, became unhappy to see him in that state. Sarabham offered the devotees a proper welcome and then sent them all to take darshan of Lord Jagannath.
Sarabhama offered the devotees a proper welcome and then sat them all to take darshan of Lord Jagannath. He asked his own son, Chandeshwar, to accompany them as a guide. After taking Lord Jagannath darshan, the devotee again returned to Sarabhama Bhattacharya house. They began to loudly chant the Hare Krishna mantra. As the Lord finally regained consciousness, just before he suddenly got up and loudly chanted, Hari Hari! Sarabhama was revealed to see the Lord regain consciousness, and he took his lotus feet. The Bhattacharya then informed them, please take your midday bath and then return to my home. Today I shall offer you Mahaprasad, the remnants of the food offered to Lord Jagannath. After bathing in the sea, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his devotees returned to the home of Sarabhama Bhattacharya. The Lord washed his feet and sat down to lunch. Sarabhama Bhattacharya had made arrangements to bring various kinds of Mahaprasad from the Jagannath temple. So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the devotee ate lunch with great happiness. Pastimes with Sarabhama Bhattacharya. Sarabhama Bhattacharya was renowned as the foremost scholar in India. Having read the Upanishad as beginners, he came a pupil of the celebrated Prakasdhar Mishra.
Staying there in Puri? Yes, ma'am.
Rath Yatra. The next morning, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his associates got up in the dark and took his bath. Then They went to see the Pandu Vijaya ceremony when Lord Jagannath, Balram, Subhadra and Sudarshan Chakra leave the altar and mount their chariots. The strongly built Daitas, carriers of the deity, were as powerful as drunken elephants. They carried Lord Jagannath from the altar to the chariot. While carrying the deities, while carrying the deities, some Daitas took hold of the Lord's shoulder and some caught his lotus feet. The Jagannath deity was bound at the waist by a strong, thick rope made of silk. The Daitas held the rope from the either side of the deities and raised him off the ground. A strong puff of cotton pads called tulsi were spread out from the temple to car. The heavy deity of Lord Jagannath was carried